AITA for telling my dad that his new girlfriend of 3 weeks and her 4 kids can't come to my birthday? Nobody invited them, but they came anyway and acted like it was their birthday. I honestly do not even know where to begin. I guess I will start by saying that my dad and I have always had a pretty decent relationship. It was never perfect, but he was always there when I needed him, and I appreciated that, especially after my parents divorced when I was 15. It was hard, of course. It is never easy to watch your family break apart, but over time, things settled into a new kind of normal. I primarily lived with my mom, especially after I left for university, but I would still see my dad most weekends when I came home. Now fast forward to about 3 weeks ago, my dad started dating this woman out of nowhere. I had no idea he was even seeing anyone until he casually dropped it into conversation one night when I was home visiting. It caught me off guard because it felt so sudden, but I figured he was an adult and he could make his own choices. I did not have to love it, but it was not really my business to control who he dated. I thought it would be a distant thing, something I might hear about now and then but not have to really interact with. I could not have been more wrong. This woman, who I barely know, has 4 kids. 4. And they are not tiny toddlers you can distract with toys. They are loud, opinionated, and very much present. I had met them briefly once when I stopped by his house to pick up some old stuff from my childhood bedroom, and even in that short interaction it was obvious that we were from totally different worlds. They were climbing on the furniture, arguing over the television, and generally acting like they owned the place, while I just stood awkwardly in the doorway wondering how quickly I could grab my things and leave without seeming rude. It was fine though, because again, I do not live there. I am away for university, and only come back on weekends to see my mom and occasionally swing by to say hi to my dad. I figured as long as I kept my visits to a minimum, it would not be a huge problem. Now here's where things really started to spiral. My birthday is coming up next week. It is kind of a big deal for me, not because I need some huge party or tons of gifts, but because my grandparents always make a special trip to visit. It is a tradition that has meant a lot to me, especially after everything with the divorce. They bring a homemade cake, we have a nice family dinner, and it is just cozy, familiar, safe. It is something I look forward to every year. So a few days ago, I was talking to my dad about plans for my birthday, and he casually mentioned that he had invited his new girlfriend and her 4 kids over for the celebration. I genuinely thought I had misheard him at first. I asked him if he meant some other day, maybe the day after, and he looked at me like I had 3 heads. He said no, he thought it would be nice for them to come and get to know the family better, since they're going to be a part of our lives. I was stunned. I told him that I really just wanted it to be a small family thing with my grandparents like always. I tried to be as polite as possible because I did not want to start a huge fight, but I made it clear that I was not comfortable with strangers crashing what has always been an intimate family gathering. He shrugged and said that he had asked my brother and sister if they cared, and they had said it was fine. That pissed me off more than I can explain. I asked him why he would ask them and not me, considering it is my birthday. And he looked at me without a shred of guilt and said that I always say no to hanging out with them when I visit anyway. And here's the thing. Yes, I have said no to hanging out with them. But he makes it sound like I am being petty or antisocial for no reason. When I come home from university, I am exhausted. I have classes, exams, and part-time work. The weekends are my only time to breathe, to see my friends from my hometown, to reset before heading back into another stressful week. The few times he has asked me to come hang out with his girlfriend and her kids, it has been last minute, chaotic, and completely inconsiderate of the fact that I already had plans or just needed a few hours to decompress. It is not that I hate them. I just do not know them at all, and honestly, it feels like my dad is trying to shove this whole new family idea down my throat without giving me any time or space to process it. I was so mad when he said that, not because he invited them once or because he is dating someone. I get it. He is allowed to move on. I was mad because he did not even think I deserved to be asked about what I wanted on my own birthday. He knew what my answer would be, so instead of facing it like an adult, he went behind my back and made it seem like it was a group decision. It felt incredibly disrespectful and dismissive, and it broke something in me that I did not even realize could still be broken after everything that has already happened in our family. I told him again, as calmly as I could manage, that I really just wanted my birthday to be small and with my grandparents like usual. I did not want to spend it making polite conversation with strangers and trying to wrangle screaming kids while pretending I was having the best time of my life. He just stared at me and said that it was important for him that I accept them because they are his future. I almost laughed because of how ridiculous it sounded. His future. He has known this woman for 3 weeks. Her kids barely even know his name, and now suddenly they are part of some master plan? I have spent the last few days stewing about this. I feel like I am stuck between a rock and a hard place. If I do not show up, I look like the bad guy who is refusing to be welcoming. If I do show up, I am going to be miserable the entire time, and my birthday, which is supposed to be a happy memory with my grandparents, will be tainted by resentment and awkwardness. My mom, bless her heart, said I could just have dinner at her house instead. And my grandparents said they will come there if I want. But it should not have to be like this. I should not have to move my birthday plans because my dad could not be bothered to have a basic conversation with me about something that actually matters to me. I keep thinking about how easy it would have been for him to say, "Hey, I was thinking about inviting them, but if you would rather keep it just family this year, that's totally fine." That would have meant the world to me. That would have shown he respected me. That he understood this was not about being selfish or petty, but about holding on to something important to me during a time in my life where everything else feels like it is constantly changing. Instead, he made it all about him, about how I am not welcoming enough, about how I am not bending over backwards to make him feel better about his life choices. I know it sounds dramatic, but it feels like he chose them over me, and it hurts more than I can explain. I do not even know what I am going to do yet. Part of me wants to just let it go, show up, smile through gritted teeth, and get it over with. But another part of me, the part that is still a hurt little kid inside, wants to stand my ground and say, "No, this is my day. I get one day a year that is supposed to be about me. I should not have to fight to be heard on my own birthday." Update. After the complete mess with my dad inviting his new girlfriend and her kids to my birthday without asking, I decided to just shift everything to my mom's house. It felt like the safest option. My mom, my grandparents, my brother, and my sister were all completely on board. Nobody wanted drama, least of all me. I never officially uninvited my dad, because technically he had not been formally invited in the first place. After that conversation, I just made it very clear when I talked to him that it was going to be a small, low-key family thing. I said it would just be immediate family, and that I really wanted it to stay quiet and simple. I thought I had put the whole issue to rest. I thought wrong. The day of my birthday started off beautifully. My grandparents arrived early in the afternoon, and the second I saw them get out of their car carrying that big cake box, I felt a little piece of my heart settle. They had spent hours baking a triple-layer chocolate cake with the same homemade buttercream frosting they have made for me since I was a little kid. It tasted like my childhood, like love, like comfort. My mom had cooked an incredible meal, pot roast, mashed potatoes, roasted vegetables, the whole works, and the house smelled amazing. It felt warm and cozy, exactly the kind of birthday I had wanted after the dumpster fire of the previous few days. My brother and sister were in good moods, laughing and joking around like we used to before everything got so complicated. For the first time in a long time, I actually felt relaxed around my family. We were just cutting into the cake, my grandfather fumbling with the big knife and teasing me about getting older, when it happened. The front door burst open without a knock, and in walked my dad, Stacy, and her entire pack of kids. I swear the air in the room changed instantly. It was like the temperature dropped 20 degrees. They came in loud, Stacy laughing like she was the guest of honor, her kids immediately charging into the room, shouting over each other about the smell of the food and the size of the cake. Stacy, looking around like she had just walked into a surprise party thrown in her honor, clapped her hands and said loudly that she could not believe we had thrown her such a beautiful birthday dinner. She was laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world, but there was this undercurrent of smugness in her voice that made my stomach twist. Everyone froze. It was like time paused. My mom's face went stiff in that terrifying way that only moms can manage when they are furious but try not to cause a scene. My grandparents looked genuinely baffled, exchanging glances like they could not figure out if this was some elaborate prank or a horrible misunderstanding. My brother and sister stopped mid-slice, still holding the plates they were handing out. I was so stunned I just stood there for a second trying to process what I was seeing. My dad looked as awkward as humanly possible, standing behind Stacy like he knew he had made a colossal mistake but was too embarrassed to do anything about it. Stacy's kids had already helped themselves to plates, pawing at the food like they had not eaten all day. I pulled myself together and stepped forward, trying to keep my voice calm even though my hands were shaking. I told them that this was a private family gathering and that they had not been invited. Stacy just laughed again and said it was just a party, that we were all family now, right? I stood my ground, told her again that no, actually they were not invited, and this was not her event to crash. The second I made it clear I was not backing down, Stacy's whole demeanor changed. Her face hardened as she gave me this tight, condescending smile that made me want to scream. She said, "Fine, if they were not welcome, they would leave." But she said it in this sarcastic, theatrical way, like she was trying to make me feel bad or make herself the victim. Her kids, of course, were not on the same page. They started whining and dragging their feet, one of them even clutching a slice of cake and begging to stay because it was so good. It was a nightmare. My dad just stood there, still saying nothing, not defending me, not taking charge, not even apologizing for the chaos. It was like he had shrunk 3 sizes and could not figure out how to fix the mess he had created. Finally, my mom had enough. She stepped forward with this icy calmness that honestly scared me a little and told them very clearly that they needed to leave immediately, that this was not their event and they needed to respect that. Her voice was low but firm, and there was no room for argument. After a lot of huffing, puffing, eye-rolling, and dramatic sighs, they finally shuffled out, slamming the door behind them so hard that the silverware on the table rattled. There was this heavy, uncomfortable silence in the house for a moment afterward, like everyone was trying to figure out how to breathe again. The mood had been shattered, and there was no getting it back completely. I felt so embarrassed, so angry, and just overwhelmingly sad that what should have been a sweet, happy family night had been turned into a public spectacle. But my family, being the amazing people they are, rallied around me. My grandmother shoved a plate of cake into my hands and told me that if this was not the most memorable birthday I had ever had, it was certainly going to be one I would never forget. My grandfather made a joke about installing a security system and starting a guest list policy for future birthdays. My brother and sister did their best to make me laugh, pulling ridiculous faces and telling stupid jokes until I finally cracked a real smile. We ate the rest of the cake, and we finished the night playing cards around the dining room table, just like we used to when I was a kid. The laughter was a little more forced than usual at first, but by the time the night wound down, it felt real again. The mood was definitely bruised, but we salvaged the night the best we could. Update 2. I wish I could say that after the disaster on my birthday, everything cooled off and we found some way to move forward. But of course, that would have been too easy. Things only got worse. About a month later, Thanksgiving rolled around. Normally, we keep things simple. For as long as I can remember, Thanksgiving meant a small, cozy dinner at my mom's house, just immediate family and my grandparents. It was never a big production. Just good food, good company, and a chance to relax before the madness of finals at university. But after the birthday fiasco, my brother and sister were worried about potential drama and suggested that this year we move dinner to a neutral location, my aunt's house, so it would feel less tense if my dad decided to pull anything. It seemed like a good idea. My aunt was happy to host. My mom agreed it was probably smart, and my grandparents thought it might be a nice change of scenery. We planned everything carefully, coordinating who would bring what dish, trying to recreate the usual warm family feeling in a new place. We did not invite my dad. Not because we were being cruel, but because it was clear he had made no effort to respect boundaries after what happened on my birthday. Nobody felt comfortable gambling the holiday on his mood or Stacy's entitlement. Everything was going well at first. The food smelled amazing, the fireplace was crackling, and everyone was in good spirits. My Aunt decorated the house beautifully with little pumpkins and garlands of autumn leaves. For a few precious minutes, it felt like things were going to be okay. Then the front door swung open. There they were, my dad, Stacy, and all 4 of her kids, marching into my aunt's house like they had been personally summoned. It was almost surreal how brazen they were. Stacy didn't even pause to greet anyone. She breezed past the entryway, headed straight for the kitchen, and started helping herself to food like it was a buffet. Her kids immediately spread out. One of them grabbed a drink off the table and managed to spill a full glass of juice all over my aunt's brand new carpet within 5 minutes of arrival. The room went dead silent. My mom looked like she was about to faint. My grandparents were frozen in place, my grandfather gripping his cane a little tighter, my grandmother's mouth opening and closing like she couldn't find the right words. My aunt, bless her heart, tried to keep her composure and quietly pulled my dad aside, asking him what exactly he thought he was doing. My dad, who clearly had no shame left to spare, said, loudly enough for half the room to hear, that they were family and deserved to be included too. His voice had a self-righteous tone that made my blood boil, like he thought he was some kind of noble hero bringing us the gift of his presence. My brother, who's usually the peacemaker of the family, stepped up before I could say anything. He told my dad, firmly, that they were not invited, that this was supposed to be a small family dinner, that after what happened last time, we had all agreed to keep it simple to avoid drama. He said my dad knew exactly what he was doing by showing up uninvited again, and that he was making everything worse, not better. Stacy, who had been eavesdropping while shoveling mashed potatoes onto her plate, immediately jumped into the conversation. She started shouting about how we were elitist and cliquey, and how we needed to get over ourselves because family is family, whether we liked it or not. Her voice got louder and shriller with every word. Soon, it turned into a full-on screaming match between her and my aunt, who had finally run out of patience. It was awful. Absolutely humiliating. My little cousins, who were there for dinner, were clinging to their mom's leg, crying because they didn't understand why the adults were yelling. My grandparents looked completely devastated, like they couldn't believe this was happening under their roof, or at least, what was supposed to be their safe family gathering. Finally, my uncle, who's a pretty calm and laid-back guy most of the time, had enough. He physically positioned himself between Stacy and the rest of us and told them they needed to leave immediately. He kept his voice low and firm, but there was no mistaking the message. Stacy made a huge scene about being thrown out on Thanksgiving, as if we were monsters, and she was some helpless victim. Her kids whined and protested, dragging their feet and complaining loudly. But eventually, they all shuffled back out the door. The second they were gone, it felt like the house could breathe again, but the damage had already been done. No one felt like eating after that. The table, once so full of laughter and warmth, was now just a collection of half-finished plates and awkward silence. People tried to rally to salvage the dinner, but it was like the soul of the holiday had been stomped all over and we couldn't quite get it back. I spent most of the evening sitting on the front steps with my brother and sister, trying to make sense of how things had spiraled so badly. It was heartbreaking realizing that this was probably the new normal with our dad, that he would keep forcing this woman and her chaos into our lives whether we liked it or not, and that he cared more about playing house with them than preserving the relationships he already had with us. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, and I was lying in bed staring at the ceiling, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my dad, a long, exhausting paragraph telling all of us how disappointed he was, how we were being unfair and close-minded, how he couldn't believe we would treat his new family like outsiders. He said he was ashamed of how we had acted, and that he didn't want to be part of such a toxic environment. It took a few weeks after the Thanksgiving disaster for anyone to even consider trying to mend the mess that had exploded between us. Emotions were still raw, and honestly, I was fine avoiding the whole situation for a while. I threw myself into finals at university, hung out with my hometown friends when I could, and tried not to think too much about how everything with my dad had fallen apart. But deep down, even through all the anger and disappointment, I missed him. He is still my dad. That part of me never switched off, no matter how much easier it would have been if it did. Eventually, it was my mom who broke the stalemate. She reached out to my dad and suggested we all meet somewhere neutral. No family homes, no big scenes, just a small place where we could sit down and actually talk like adults. She said it wasn't about rehashing every bad moment, but about trying to find a way forward before even more resentment piled up between us. I was hesitant. I worried it would turn into another disaster, or worse, another guilt trip, where I would somehow be made to feel like the villain for wanting boundaries. But against my better judgment, I agreed. I figured if there was even the slightest chance of salvaging something real with my dad, it was worth trying. We met at a small coffee shop downtown, the kind of place with rickety tables, chipped mugs, and way too many fake plants crammed into the windowsills. It felt safe, neutral territory, unthreatening in a way that bigger or more formal places wouldn't have been. It was awkward at first. My mom was there. My dad was there. Stacy was very notably not there. And I was there, sitting across from him, feeling like we were strangers trying to remember how to speak the same language. My mom took the lead, easing us into the conversation by calmly explaining how hurtful it had been that he had bulldozed over boundaries and traditions that meant a lot to all of us, not just me. She said it was never about him moving on or finding happiness with someone new. Everyone wanted that for him. It was about basic respect, about not trampling over years of shared history to force a new life into existence without allowing anyone the space to adjust. For once, my dad actually listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't roll his eyes or sigh heavily like he usually does when confronted. He just sat there, looking older and smaller somehow, and listened. When it was my turn to speak, I told him everything I had been holding back. I said that I didn't hate his girlfriend or her kids. I wasn't trying to sabotage his happiness, but I needed time. I needed to feel like my feelings mattered too, especially on days that had been sacred to our family long before anyone new entered the picture. I said that being steamrolled into pretending everything was fine only made me resentful and distant, not closer to them. I said I miss my dad, but I couldn't build a relationship with a stranger family if it meant tearing down everything we already had. There was a long, heavy pause after I finished. I braced myself for excuses, for defensiveness, for the same disappointing responses I had gotten used to hearing. But instead, my dad simply said he was sorry. A real apology, not one of those non-apologies filled with "if I hurt you," or "but you have to understand." Just a raw, honest "I'm sorry. I didn't realize how much I was hurting you." He went on to admit that he had felt guilty about moving on after the divorce. He said he had been so desperate to prove that he was okay, that he could still have a full, happy life, that he rushed things too fast. He confessed he thought if he acted like everything was fine, everyone else would just fall into line and believe it too. He said he now understood that in trying to create this shiny new future, he had badly hurt the people he cared about most. Hearing that was like feeling a massive weight lift off my chest. It didn't erase everything that had happened. It didn't magically fix the last few months. But it mattered. It mattered more than I even realized it would. We made some real agreements right there in that cramped little coffee shop. No more surprise guests at family events. Ever. If Stacy and her kids were to be invited somewhere, it would only happen after a real discussion, not an ambush. My relationship with my dad was my own. It wasn't dependent on how close I was to Stacy or her children. He said he respected that and promised he wouldn't force a dynamic that wasn't ready to exist yet. Since that conversation, things have been much smoother. My dad and I have met up a few times, just the two of us, grabbing lunch or walking around the park. And those meetings have felt good. Not perfect. There's still a little awkwardness sometimes, little gaps where the hurt still lingers. But it feels real again, like something worth rebuilding slowly and carefully, instead of something that was slipping through my fingers, no matter how hard I tried to hold on. As for Stacy and her kids, they're still around. I know they're an important part of my dad's life, and I'm okay with that now. But they stay in their lane. I'm not pressured to include them in everything, and because of that, ironically, I've actually started to get to know them a little bit, in settings where I feel comfortable. No ambushes. No forced bonding. Just small steps at my own pace. Looking back on it all, my birthday this year was far from perfect. It started with heartbreak and anger and confusion. But the ending, sitting across from my dad in that little coffee shop, hearing him truly listen, seeing him actually try to be better for me, I guess you could say it was kind of a gift after all.